In this video, I'll show you how to edit a portrait from start to finish. Let's get started. If you'd like to follow along with me, I've included a download link to this photo in the video description. To get started, let's take a closer look at this photo. There's a workflow that I generally use for portrait photos, and that workflow starts with cleanup. You can see that there are little blemishes on the skin that we can clean up. We can also clean up the stray hairs that are overlapping on her face. And we can even clean up the stray hairs that stand out on the hair itself. These little changes will make a big difference. So once those blemishes are removed, we can move on to the next step and fix the lighting. This picture is dark and dull. I think we can easily brighten it up with a curves adjustment. To refine the lighting even more, our next step is a technique called dodge and burn. Using this technique, we can add light to certain areas to enhance them. By adding more light, we'll bring more attention to these areas. And using this technique, we can also do the opposite and darken certain areas. This can help to dull things down, like in the background. And we can also use this technique to add darkness to her makeup to make it stand out more. With the lighting finished, we can move on to the color. For this photo, I mainly want to adjust the color of her skin. Skin can be tricky to fix, but I'll show you exactly how I like to do it to make the skin look more vibrant. To finish, we can add some sharpening. We'll make a few areas sharper to make them look more in focus. I love doing this with the eyes. Okay, we have our plan, so let's jump into Affinity. We can get started with our first step, cleanup. To do this, I'm going to add a new pixel layer so we have something to paint on top of. Then I'm going to go over here to select the inpainting brush tool. Make sure that your inpainting brush is set to current layer and below. And then we can go ahead and get started. So I'm going to first start by focusing on the skin. I'm going to paint over any area that's standing out to me as a blemish. I like to keep my brush pretty small for this, about the size of the blemish. That way I'm not painting too much and getting rid of skin detail. If you want to adjust the size of your paintbrush, you can use the bracket keys on your keyboard to quickly adjust the size. As I'm painting over blemishes, I'm making sure to leave behind things like freckles or natural wrinkles in the skin or the lips, just to keep things looking natural. Now that I'm done with the skin, I'm going to move on to fixing the stray hairs. You can see there's quite a few hairs overlapping her eyes. So using a very small brush, I'm just going to paint over these hairs to remove them. Now, this might not look perfect, and you might remove a little bit too much from her eyelashes, and that's okay. We're just trying to remove the main bulk of the hair, and we can come back to fix this later. I think I'll leave a little bit of the hair overlapping right here, but getting the hair out of her eyes has already made a big difference. So I'm just going to continue up, getting rid of the top part of each of those hair strands. All right, I'm going to move on to doing the other eye. This eye is actually kind of tricky because it has a hair that's out of focus, making it larger. So I'm going to try to carefully paint over it in a few areas. I've messed up the eye right there. That's okay, we can go back and fix that. Okay, that was pretty good. Softly painting to remove some of that. I'll do the same for these out of focus hairs. Okay, that already looks like a big improvement. Here's the before and after. Now I'm just going to go to her actual hair and I'll remove any hairs that are distracting. So you can see these hairs on the outside are pretty distracting, so I'll paint over those. And I'll also paint over any hairs that are going in the opposite direction of her main hair. So you can see in this area, her hair is going downward. So this hair could be a good one to remove as it's a little bit distracting going sideways like that. So I'm going to go through and remove hairs like that that are making her hair look a little bit messy. I feel like in this lower area, I could do this all day. There's so many hairs, but just to save time, I'm going to leave that alone and move on to the hairs that are surrounding her face. I think the hairs around her face are much more important to clean up. Okay, now that we're done with that, I'm going to clean up the eyes a little bit more to remove any smudginess that was left behind from the inpainting. To do this, I'm going to switch tools and I'm going to use the clone brush tool. Make sure this is set to current layer and below, and then we can go ahead and fix a few areas. So you can see I cut into her iris a little bit. To fix this, I'm going to hold Alt or Option, and then I'm going to click on an area to sample it. I'll make my brush a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to paint to bring that green area downward into this area. By sampling these colors and painting them in, we're able to get a very accurate color to fill in the space. I'll do the same for her pupil. The hair crossed the pupil, so I want to bring more black areas down here to round out the pupil. I'm sampling a few different areas as I go, just to blend everything together nicely. So I'm keeping my hand hovered over the Alt or Option key as I sample and paint, sample and paint. So that's how I like to do it. And you can see this already looks so much better. Here's the before and after, cleaning up that area. There's also a few areas of repetition that the inpainting brush left behind. So I'll sample an area and paint to reduce that repetition. I think I'll also sample a little bit of the white of her eye to remove a few of these eyelashes coming down into it. Okay, I think this eye looks really good. So now I'll come over here and see if this needs to be cleaned up. I think some of her eyelashes could be cleaned up, so I'm just going to sample and try to reduce some of the smudginess here. So you can see right here, we've lost a lot of detail from these eyelashes. To fix that, I'm going to make my brush very small, and I'm going to sample this dark patch right here, and I'm going to add this black area back in. By sampling this dark area and painting, you can see I'm able to recreate some of these eyelashes. I do have to sample quite a bit though, resampling over and over to make sure that I'm sampling the black paint, because you can see the sample point moves up into the lighter gray area as I'm doing this. All right, I think that looks better right there. I think I'll also clean up this line right here. There were a lot of hairs covering it, but it looks like it should all be this darker color. So I'll sample this darker color and I'll paint it in. Just connecting the eyelid line. Okay, the last thing I want to do is just clean up this eyebrow that looks a little bit smudgy. Okay, with that, we finally have the cleanup all finished. So you can see the before and after of this area. Coming down here, you can see the before and after. Such a big difference. All right, with the cleanup done, we're ready to move on to the lighting. I'm going to add a curves adjustment so that we can adjust this. I'm going to click and drag on the spline to raise it up to brighten our image. You can see this already looks a lot better, but one thing I've noticed about this picture is that her black makeup actually looks a little bit gray. The shadows are too light. So I'll click and drag on the shadow side of the spline to darken that. And you can see what a difference this is making to her dark makeup. I think this looks so much better. Here's the before and after. All right, now it's time for the dodge and burn technique. This technique has a very specific setup, so just stick with me here. If we set up the dodge and burn layer correctly, we'll be able to brighten and darken very naturally. So let's get started by adding a new pixel layer. And then we're going to fill this layer with a color. So go over here and select the Fill Bucket tool, and then change the color to 50% gray. So I'm at the halfway point right here, but just to make sure, I'll look at my numbers to see that they're set to 0, 0, 50. That's perfect, so I'll click right here to fill the layer. All right, to finish this setup, I'm just going to go to the blend modes right here, and I'm going to set this to soft light. The soft light blend mode will make this layer invisible. So you might be wondering what the point of this layer is. Let me show you. The goal of the soft light blend mode is to help things blend together. So when you have a color like 50% gray, this will fully blend into your image. But if you change your color to something brighter than 50% gray, like white, then you'll be able to naturally brighten your image. And if you paint with something darker than 50% gray, like black, then you'll be able to naturally darken your image. This is really nice because you can strategically brighten or darken your image all on this one layer. And you can just switch your paint color back and forth between black and white. By the way, the shortcut to switch your two colors is X. So go ahead and press X to switch these back and forth as we go. Okay, with that explanation out of the way, let's use this layer. I'll press Command or Control Z to undo my painting, and we can go ahead and get started with white paint to brighten our image. I'm going to lower the flow down quite a bit, and then we can go ahead and paint. Now, for this technique, I think it looks really nice to brighten up the center of the face. So let's go ahead and start at the top on her forehead. We will paint a little bit to brighten there. Then with a smaller brush, we can paint down the bridge of her nose and give a little extra brightness to the tip of her nose. For her lips, I like to brighten just above her top lip right here in this Cupid's bow area. And then to make her lips look more shiny, I'm just going to brighten a little bit right here on her bottom lip. And continuing down her face, I'm just going to use a larger brush to paint on the center of her chin. So now you can see we've brightened up the center of her face in a line going down. So let's go side to side now and brighten up under her eyes. We can also brighten around her eyes. I like to do this by brightening the inner corner area right here. And we can also brighten the top of her eyelid a little bit. All right, to finish our brightening, I like to add a little bit of brightness to the hair as well. For this, I'm going to look for strands of hair that look brighter than the hairs around it. So you can see this area looks a little brighter, so I'll just paint some more brightness over that area. By brightening up those areas, you can see that we've added some nice attention to those areas. Here's the before and after. Now we can switch to black paint by pressing X on our keyboard, and we can darken a few areas. Basically, I want to darken the opposite areas of what I just brightened. So instead of the center of the face, I'm going to darken the outer edges. With a larger brush, I'm just going to darken her hairline. And I'll darken the edges of her face down here. Just to darken a few other edges, I'm going to darken around the edges of her nose. And I'll darken a little bit underneath her lip. Okay, to finish on her face, I really like darkening around the eyes to emphasize them. For this, I'm just going to darken what's already dark to enhance it. So I'll darken her eyebrows. I'll darken her eyelashes, especially focusing on her eyeliner. And I'll darken around the edges of the iris and the pupil. Now you can see this beautiful contrast we've added here. Here's the before and after of her eyes. To finish dodging and burning, I'm going to add some darkness to her hair and the background. I'll start with the background with a very large brush. I'll just darken it a bit. And then with a smaller brush, I'll darken a few dark areas of her hair just to enhance those areas. All right, now that we're done with that, we can see the before and after. Now, every time I do this dodge and burn technique, I overdo it. It just happens as I'm painting. I get a little bit heavy-handed. So to finish, let's just reduce the opacity of this layer to make it look more natural. Before and after. That's much better. If you can see there's an area where you really overdid it, you can also switch your paint color to 50% gray and paint on this layer to erase what you've painted. All right, that was a lot of work so far. Great job. Let's do the color next. So the selective color adjustment is my favorite adjustment for the skin. It has these sliders that you can adjust to add color tints to your picture. As much as I love this adjustment, I do find these sliders a little bit annoying because when you raise them, you can add cyan, magenta, and yellow. That's pretty obvious. But if you lower the sliders, you're actually going to be adding different colors. It looks like you'd be adding white, but that's just not the case. I wish the sliders would look like this, because on the other side of the sliders, we can add red, green, and blue as we lower them. I'm going to leave this graphic on the screen so that we can reference it as we work. Now, you might be wondering which colors you should add to skin. Skin is made up of red and yellow tones. So as I adjust the sliders, I'll try to add more red and yellow to make the skin more vibrant. To add red, I'll be lowering the cyan slider, and to add yellow, I'll raise the yellow slider. This middle slider kind of depends on the picture. Sometimes you'll lower it to add green. Sometimes you'll raise it to add magenta. And you'll see that as we begin adjusting the sliders. As one final tip, above the sliders, we can change the color channel. Basically, this just tells Affinity which color areas in our picture we're trying to focus on. Since the skin is naturally made of red and yellow, we're going to stick to the red and yellow color channels. Okay, that was a lot of information. Let's see it in action. I'll start in the red color channel. Like I said, I want to add more red and yellow. So I'll begin by lowering the cyan slider to add red. I'll also raise the yellow slider to add more yellow. For the green magenta slider, I'll just move it side to side to see what looks better for this picture. I think I'm going to raise it a bit to add magenta. So here's the before and after so far. Before and after. The color changes are pretty subtle, but it does look a bit better. Let's continue by changing the color channel to yellow. Again, I'm going to add more red, so I'll lower the cyan slider to add red. And then I'll raise the yellow slider to add yellow. For this one, I'll check again, green or magenta. I think I'll add just a little bit of magenta. Now we can see the before and after. I think the skin looks much more vibrant. It looks really nice. I know this adjustment can be a little bit confusing, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to make the skin look more natural just by adding red and yellow. To finish, let's do some sharpening. Going to our filters, I'm going to add the high pass filter. To use this filter, zoom into your photo and then raise the radius. You'll start to see details of your picture appear. Now, for sharpening, I like to just raise it a little bit until we can start to see the details of the eye appear here. Those details are what's going to be sharpened. Then we can change the blend mode to soft light. Now, as I zoom in here, you can see the before and after. On the eye, this looks really nice to enhance detail. Before, after. But as nice as this looks, it actually looks kind of strange on skin. Here's the before and after. It's sharpening the details on the skin, which we don't want. To make this only appear on her eyes, I'm going to invert this layer by pressing Command or Control I. So now this layer is not applied to anything in our picture. The mask is black, so to reveal it again, we need to paint in white paint over the areas we want sharper. I'll raise my flow and I'll paint this over her eyebrow, her eyelashes, and her iris. I'll also paint this over her lips, just to draw more attention there as well. Now you can see the before and after, but it's pretty subtle. So I'm going to duplicate this layer a couple of times with Command or Control J. So now you can see the before and after. Before, after. And here it is on the lips. Before, after. You can see how much this sharpened things up. It's a nice finishing touch for your pictures. With that finished, I'm just going to select all of our layers by holding Shift and clicking. And now you can see the complete before and after. This looks so good. What a difference. Now, in this video, I showed you a few different techniques for retouching that can really make a good difference for your portraits. But if you can believe it, I actually have so much more to teach you. If you want to dive deeper into the amazing world of portrait retouching, I'll leave a link in the video description for my retouching course. I'm really proud of this course. It has so many great tips to help you fix common problems in portraits. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next Affinity Revolution tutorial.